Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining in today. Thank you for tuning in. Today, we are going to be discussing not a very long topic, not a very, I would say, a lengthy topic that we discuss in Indian history, but something that is uniquely significant when we talk about the national movement. All right. So, the topic that we're discussing today is the Swadeshi movement. Not exactly, I would characterize it to be a full-fledged, let's say, period of study or understanding processes, but it is something that puts the entirety of the coming of the 20th century into perspective. All right. It stands at a very unique juncture, when we discuss the beginning of mass nationalism in India. All right. And we will be thoroughly going through, I would say, briefly going through the period between 1903 to 1908, which is like a 4-year, 5-year time period. Although, what is significant about this period is incipient nationalism. All right. Incipient nationalism, which can be understood as the rise of nationalist sentiments in India for the very first time, because the term, as the term suggests, Swadeshi, as has been termed widely, the term Swadesh coming also with Swaraj, which should be understood as self-rule. How and when did we started to believe? When did we start to believe that we should rule ourselves instead of being ruled by the British? All right. It stands at a unique juncture of the beginning of the 20th century. And we have Lord Curzon as the viceroy during this time period. Now, Curzon's politics, and I will briefly introduce you to this idea because I want to introduce you to concepts. I want to introduce you to particular subjects and what we are trying to study, so that when you read about it, that is when you can relate and remember stuff. I will not give you all the details that you need to study in this brief lecture of 25-30 minutes. All right. It is practically impossible, because then what will I teach? What will I explain you? How will I analyze stuff? The purpose is to give you context of the things that are happening, context of how things are beginning in the 20th century. All right. Now, briefly, let's talk about certain things that Curzon is doing. Curzon is part of surveys. He's got the Secretary of State, who is Risley. And when the surveys and census, they come up, they are like, they need to partition Bengal, they need to divide Bengal, because Bengal is too large. It is too large for administrative purposes, and therefore it needs to be divided and into East Bengal and West Bengal. All right. So what they do is that they put out proposals after surveys. So there is Assam. Let me just put it over here. So there would be Assam, there would be Bengal over here, and then there would be Bihar over here, and then there would be Orissa over here. So this is a huge landmass that is under just one provincial administration. So they had already divided Assam in 1874, if I'm not wrong. All right, 1874. But this had happened earlier. So what they're trying to do now is that they want to partition Bengal between West Bengal and East Bengal. East Bengal that goes on to become Bangladesh at a particular point of time. So what they're trying to do is that they're trying to divide Bengal. So that is one thing, this is the thing that sparks the beginning of the Swadeshi movement. All right. However, there are certain other things that we also need to remember. There was the Arms Act that was passed in 1878. There is Calcutta Municipal Corporation Act, that is Calcutta Municipal Amendment Act, that is passed. Then there is the Indian Universities Act, that is passed. And now what these acts are doing is that they are chipping away the power, the very limited power that Indians might have in the context of what we are trying to talk about. All right. So it chips away the power that Indians that might have, that the power that they might have in, let's say, the administration of the British, which is already very much strenuous. It is clamping down on the Indians, and it is also believed that the period of Curzon's viceroyalty was the high peak of British imperialism in India. Because after this, there is a period of reforms, Morley Minto, Montagu Chelmsford, and then Government of India Act, and then ultimately, let's say, the Cabinet Mission, and then independence. So this is the high point of British imperialism in India, which we can, put at the beginning, and I would say this is 1900 to 1905 or 1909 till about 1909. This is the high period of British imperialism in India. All right. So this high period of British imperialism in India is actually going to fuel, and these administrative reforms and this administrative divisions and all of this is what is going to form the background of what is going to happen in, let's say, this part for this time period, and from, let's say, 1904 onwards. All right. And also 1890s was a period of consistent famines and consistent period of, I would say, problems for the masses and problems even for the urban society of India. All right. So this period of, I would say, economic hardships plus the political clamping down, they come together and form the context of the Swadeshi movement. All right. Now let's talk about what actually happens. All right. So in this particular context, when, let's say, Curzon announces that Bengal is going to be partitioned, there is widespread, I would say, not demonstrations at first, but apprehensions in the minds of the Indians. They're like, this is not good. This is unacceptable. From being unacceptable to being, this is not good and we need to do something about it. That is the shift that we see this is the idea behind the Swadeshi movement. All right. So since I am in a habit of not just talking about objective history, I want to discuss ideas with you. I want you to understand ideas, the larger background in which we place certain historical events. That is our task as historians. We can obviously, search about things that happened. We know about events that happened, but are all events history? History is a conversation with those events in the particular present context. So how do we deal with the Swadeshi movements? Sumit Sarkar talks about the Swadeshi movement in context of 4 larger trends. He says there are 4 trends that we can see while talking about the Swadeshi movement. And what are they? First is, I would say, or he would say, moderate politics, petitions, and what is the general charge against the Congress is that they were just a petition reform party that were just signing petitions to the British administration and hoping that they would reform something. All right. So this is the first trend that we see in the Swadeshi movement. This is the beginning of incipient nationalism, because this is where it begins. It's very nascent. It begins from here. It begins from moderate politics of people and congressmen gathering around in places and, talking about the things that they find problematic. But it does not come to real conclusions or let's say real change in the society. So another thing that also happens and that follows this, or let's say comes along with this moderate politics during the time of the Swadeshi movement, is constructive Swadeshi. Constructive Swadeshi is, you know, activizing the people. It is mobilizing the people. It is educating the people in the ideas of Swadeshi. How should people be trained? Because you see, state politics and people and politics and masses, it's a complex dynamic. It is a complex dynamic of relations. So they need to be channelized. They need to be taught. They need to be educated in terms of how they should be, you know, dealing with the problems that are coming to them. So in the Swadeshi movement, we see the rise of, you know, samitis and let's say rise of educational institutions. The Shantiniketan of Rabindranath Tagore is a unique example. It is one of the most, it is a pioneering example of constructive Swadeshi work. And the formation of Anushilan Samiti, or let's say the Swadeshi Bandhak Samiti, and you know, these samitis and these educational institutions and people going towards, you know, different states, and they are educating the masses in the process of starting to protest against the British rule, because they need to, because we have seen 1857, there is 1857 in context, but it has been 40 years till that. 40 years is a long time period, all right, and there is a huge difference between how we can contextualize the Swadeshi or the turn of the 20th century and how we would look at 1857 or the culmination of the 18th century debate, or let's say 100 years of decline of, you know, the Mughal Empire. All right, it's a whole different story. So constructive Swadeshi is basically educating people of how they should be working, or let's say how they should be working towards protesting or educating them against the British, I would say, system. Because an important part of constructive Swadeshi is basically educating them, and educating not on the lines of how British are trying to educate the Indian masses, which is, we know from the Wood's Dispatch and the old establishment of universities after 1857, is how the British are trying to take over the education system and, you know, forming that Indian who would work for the British. So in order to inculcate a mentality against that entire British mentality or British state imperialism or colonization mentality, they need to come up with a new education system in order to teach people into learning and thinking against the state, thinking against the British state. So that is a crucial part of the, you know, the beginning of the 20th century, which comes with the constructive Swadeshi, which is what Sumit Sarkar is talking about. Then there is, with this we see also what Sumit Sarkar says, and I would like to characterize it also as political extremism. We see political extremism in the time of the Swadeshi movement. Now, what does Sumit Sarkar imply by political extremism? Political extremism, Sumit Sarkar is saying, and you see, when you read about certain events that you need to memorize for the purpose of your exams, these categories are going to be beneficial for you. How? I will tell you. Political extremism is what I would say, or what Sumit Sarkar would say, or what scholars would characterize how religious festivals or religion or culture is used as a symbol to work up an idea of Swadeshi, to work up an idea of nationalism, to work up communitarian lines of mobilizing people in order to channelize their energy politically against the British state. It is usage of cultural trends, or let's say cultural symbols, or let's say cultural practices, or communitarian practices in order to work up an ideology, a political ideology that works against the British system. All right, this is how I would like to characterize it. And but Sumit Sarkar terms it as political extremism, because it starts to go towards an extreme. It's not like religious usage was new. Religious symbols and all of this was persistent when we see, let's say, 1893. 1893 or 1891 is what Gyan Pandey would say, you know, the beginning of, let's say, construction of communalism in India. All right. This is when the Banaras riots, the cow protection movement and all of those riots, they happen. All right. But so we need to put all of these things in context when we are studying the Swadeshi movement, because this is on the rise. Political extremism rises. I will give you the examples of, let's say, let's talk about Tilak's Ganpati festival and Shivaji festival. All right. Ganpati festival and Shivaji festival. All right. Now they had begun in 1894 and 1895, but what happens during the Swadeshi period is that these cultural festivals are used as to gather people around and talk about the idea of Swadeshi. All right. I should write Swadeshi over here so that you can you know, keep relating it back to this. Ganpati festival, Shivaji festival is basically something that Tilak starts during this particular time period, and during the time period of Swadeshi, which is not this, I'm so sorry, it is not this. During the time of the Swadeshi, it begins to be a forum where people can talk about the idea of Swadeshi, where they can talk about the idea of Swaraj, where they can talk about the idea of freedom, because, and how this is, you know, linked to incipient nationalism is because Congress, as Sumit Sarkar would also like to talk about, and because we also have to talk about the Congress split, is that the Congress was not an institute that was representing the masses of India. Sumit Sarkar says that the Congress was tottering to its fall. The term that is used is the Congress was tottering to its fall. It's a famous term. It comes in multiple exams also. Who said this? It's Sumit Sarkar. The Congress was tottering to its fall because it did not represent the masses of India. It did not talk about the whole of India. It is just an elite forum that meets every year, maybe one session, maybe two sessions. All right. And they just talk about reform. And it's an English medium base. And not many, the masses don't essentially speak that language. So they need a forum where they can talk about the ideas that they want to talk about, because everybody wants to talk about freedom. Everybody is, you know, extremely disgusted with the British rule. Not everybody. All, obviously, there are people who would be benefiting with the British rule. There are plenty of people. Sometimes the Congress is charged that it was being benefited with the British rule, but let's not go there. The point is that with these festivals and how Tilak uses them is that they become a forum where where the masses who relate to these people can talk about nationalism, can talk about freedom. All right. So, and why Sumit Sarkar uses the term extreme is because from the usage of such tools, extreme politics of communalism rises during this period that goes to the formation of, let's say, the Muslim League in 1906 and the Hindu Mahasabha, you know, sometime after that. I think it's 1915, the formation of Hindu Mahasabha. All right. So, what we need to understand is that this political extremism is of the Swadeshi movement that uses all of these, symbols and stuff like that. It is on the rise. It is a trend that we see and in which we can contextualize the activities of the Swadeshi movement. All right. The last is basically the rise of revolutionary terrorism. The last that he says is revolutionary terrorism. All right. Revolutionary terrorism. Now, there are definitely certain strands who do not believe in moderate politics. So they are termed to be, I would say extremists. The split between the Congress that happens at Surat, at the Surat session in 1907, is basically because of a clash of ideologies of how the Swadeshi movement should proceed. All right. There are certain, the trends, I would come to Surat session in a bit. Let's wind up with this idea of revolutionary terrorism first, because I would like to, because this is where the activities of Hemchandra Kanungo, or let's say Chittaranjan Das, or let's say Chapekar brothers and all of these people, they are going to come about. These are all basically followers of, Phadke and Tilak and Aurobindo Ghosh, who inspire a generation of young minds who then, go on to talk about or basically get into activities of terrorism. There is a historiographical connotation or historiographical note that says that terrorism or revolutionary terrorism, or let's say communalistic terrorism in India, was due to the differential impact of the British rule on the various different populations of India. Now, all the revolutionaries, if you would read about, let's say, later revolutionaries, not the people from the Swadeshi movement, later revolutionaries, or let's say Bhagat Singh, if you would talk about, or let's say people like Ram Prasad Bismil, if you would talk about, they were all well read into the revolutionary ideas that were, incipient in Europe since the time of, I would say, Gramsci. Antonio Gramsci. All right. The unification of Italy. These people, they have read all this. They are Bhagat Singh and all of these people, they are widely read people. All right. And it is a, so then how do you characterize them as terrorists? Because terrorist, is a notion that is given to them by the British. For us, they are freedom fighters. For us, they are revolutionaries who are trying to bring about a change in the political system through revolutionary activities. Revolutionary activities is the usage of basically, violence, not exactly, I would say, violence per se, like, mass killing or massacre, that is carried out by the state. But this is a different strand of activities that they are carrying out. Bombing of, let's say, the parliament later on, which was not aimed to harm any human life, but it was to cause terror in the minds of the British administration. So it is that sort of, quote unquote terror that we are talking about. All right. So this gives way, the Swadeshi movement gives way to this such activities in the very later times after the Surat split, basically when the movement itself has fizzled out. All right, when the movement itself fizzles out. So the movement begins with, I would say, and let's talk about certain, limited facts, is that I would like to talk about, I give you certain facts. Certain facts, let's say the Calcutta Town Hall Proclamation is when the Congress start to adopt the idea of boycott. This is the beginning of, the town hall in Calcutta, which is, I think, 7th August in Calcutta. Calcutta Town Hall. Please mind my handwriting. It's pretty bad. All right. 7th August, Calcutta, and this is when they adopt the idea of boycott. All right. Next, I would also like to talk about a particular date, which is 16th October, which is when the partition of Bengal comes into effect. It is the day when the state says that now the administration has split, and it is celebrated by the British, but it is celebrated by the Indians as a day of mourning. Day of mourning, and what Tagore would say, a celebration of Rakhi Bandhan. Rakhi Bandhan, basically tying the knot between the Bengalis from East Bengal and West Bengal. That's the whole idea of it. Then there is the idea of Nai Dhobi Band, Hukka Pani Band. All right. So this is essentially a notion in order to get around with caste politics and communitarian politics, in order to get people around and, get them to protest against something that has happened, something that has befallen among them. All right. Nai Dhobi Band, Hukka Pani Band, Rakhi Bandhan, celebrating it as a day of mourning and a day of fasting by not, lighting the hearth that particular day. So that is how the movement basically begins and starts to gain ground. And slowly what happens is that, the Congress itself in their Banaras session, I think happens in December 1905. It is presided over by Gokhale, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, if you would know. All right. Gokhale, and they adopt the idea of Swadeshi, education, and boycott, and all of those things. So there are basically 4 things that they talk about, and because on these 4 things is what the Surat split is going to take place. All right, if they want to adopt these 4 things or not, which is boycott, education, Swadeshi, boycott, Swadeshi, education, and stuff like that. All right, so these are the dates that are important. You can definitely find other important events that happen in the movement. There is founding of various journals. I can give you a list of long journals that you may note, but the key of them are, let's say, if I would like to give you is Vande Mataram, or let's say Sandhya, Yugantar. They all come up during this particular time period. Vande Mataram is by Aurobindo Ghosh, and Sandhya is by Brahma Bandhav Upadhyay. So these are all facts, and there's a long list of journals that are coming up. They are trying to talk about the idea of Swadeshi, and I would also like to talk about Dawn Society that was founded in 1902, which becomes the precursor to Educational Council of India. Dawn Society, that was founded in 1902, a little prior to the beginning of the Swadeshi movement, but it becomes the precursor to National Council of Education, and it is one of the most important societies for what sort of Swadeshi activities and Swadeshi education that is going to take place during this particular time period. Then there are samitis that are found. I was giving you the examples of Swadeshi Bandhak Samiti, or let's say Dhaka Anushilan Samiti. It is written like this: Dhaka Anushilan Samiti. All right. There is Swadeshi Bandhak Samiti, founded by Ashwini Kumar Datta. So these are all trying to talk about education and everything. And this is a period that also sees the rise of industries in India again, because they are adopting the idea of Swadeshi. They are boycotting the goods that are coming from the Manchester mills. Basically, there is an entire idea of cotton, the decline of cotton imports, which is due to, let's say, the Swadeshi movement. But the idea of boycotting cotton is listed out as something that is very symbolic, because cotton at that point of time, boycotting was seen as boycotting the Manchester cotton, the Manchester machine made cotton, and accepting coarse made Indian khadi cotton that we know. All right. Now, what else is something that is important? I can maybe, you know, give you certain names of certain industries that were found, which is, you know, Calcutta Pottery Works, or let's say Banga Lakshmi Cotton Mill, which are founded in 1906. So, you know, these are all the revival of industries, or let's say the beginning of Indian industries again after, you know, the deindustrialization that we witnessed in the 18th century. What else can we talk about? We have to talk about the Surat session split. Is something that happens due to, because now the movement is spreading from Bengal to other places, and there is a debate as to whether or not they should, you know, continue with the activities of how it is going to, you know, proceed. So the moderates like, you know, Firoz Shah Mehta, or let's say Gokhale, versus the extremists like Tilak or Lala Lajpat Rai. They would be like, ki, we need to, these people want to spread the movement, because these people, they spread the movement to other parts of India, and these people earlier they want to limit it just to Bengal because they want to reverse the partition, but then they also agree to that. But there is essentially a difference in how they should proceed, because they are like, they advocate political extremism. All right. And these people, they want to continue with moderate politics. So what happens at Surat? Earlier, the session was supposed to happen in Nagpur, but then it is shifted to Surat. So basically, Surat was part of the Bombay presidency. So Tilak cannot become the presidency candidate. So these people, the extremists, they advocate Lala Lajpat Rai. These people, they advocate Rash Bihari Bose for the presidency. So Lala Lajpat Rai, he says that I am going to step down. I will not be a candidate for the presidency, and let Bose take it, because otherwise the Congress is going to, you know, split between the two. But ultimately they still split because of the things that they were debating about, you know, the things of how the movement should proceed in terms of how they should, you know, define Swadeshi, because Dadabhai Naoroji at this particular point of time gives a very ambiguous definition of Swaraj. So basically these people, they ultimately what happens, because it is happening at the banks of river Tapti. The Surat session happens at the banks of, you know, so they throw shoes and chappals at each other, and they can't come to a conclusion as to how the the movement should proceed, and ultimately they walk out. People walk out. There is throwing of shoes and chappals. Ultimately, people with clubs, they enter the Congress session, and they have the thing. Whole thing has to, you know, be dispersed. So that was the Surat split, and these are the particular names that might be important. Rash Bihari Bose becomes the president after this, but the Congress does not meet together. The moderates and the extremists, they don't meet together for a very long time until the Lucknow Pact again, you know. And a whole lot of things happen. The extremists who are very excited about it. So basically Tilak is put to trial. He is sent to Mandalay for 6 years of prison, and Lala Lajpat Rai, he returns to moderate politics. Aurobindo Ghosh, who is very important for all the territory and revolutionizing the youth, he goes to retirement in 1909. Aurobindo Ghosh, I'm talking about. He goes to retirement. He goes to Pondicherry. All right. Tilak is put into prison, and basically the movement fizzles out. This is how the Swadeshi movement fizzles out, and that is how we can put all of these things in perspective. If we are to put these things in perspective now, let us analyze it as failures, and let us see how and where they failed. Firstly, the Swadeshi movement, they can't muster the support of the Muslims. So there are no, not I would say no, but very meager Muslim population participation. No Muslim participation. All right, there is no mass participation of the workers. No workers, the workers and the peasants, the kisans, they are all sitting on the sidelines of the Swadeshi movement. All right. Other than that, what happens is that with the Swadeshi movement, we realize that an armed struggle is destined for failure when we are going against the British. And finally, we also understand that the beginning of the constructive Samiti or the constructive work of the Swadeshi needs to, the constructive work needs to be, you know, carried forward, because the educated and the uneducated masses, they need to be trained how to protest, because they would not be willing to give up the jobs or let's say the things that they have earned so hard for generations to in the past under the British rule, to get to a position of, you know, putting food on the table for their families. The rising middle class and the bourgeois that we call it, they have worked hard so that they can put some people in, you know, some sort of work so that they can, you know, earn money under the British rule and, you know, have at least a stable position in the society. All right. So this constructive work needs to be, you know, increased in order to train these people that it is okay that you have to, you know, balance these things out and go to strikes and manage stuff like that in order to, you know, actually be educated enough to work against the ideologies of the Raj, basically, in order to achieve Swaraj. So, and interestingly, all of these issues are something that Gandhi takes up later on when he arrives to India. Gandhi is going to take up from all the experiences of the Swadeshi movement. He writes the Hind Swaraj. All right. He takes up all of these issues, and that is how he begins with his program of Satyagraha. All right. So he's going to take up and learn from all of these ideas. So that is pretty much it from the Swadeshi movement. I would definitely urge you to read something, and the reading that I would like you to read, of course you can read Spectrum, of course you can go ahead and read all of these books that are available for modern Indian history, but the book that I would prescribe particularly is Ishita Banerjee Dubey. Ishita Banerjee Dubey, the book, it is a wonderful read if you would go about it, and I would urge you to actually, you know, go ahead and, you know, read this book. Just go ahead and read the chapter on Swadeshi and boycott. Just read that chapter, and all the facts that might be given in different places would be explained to you. You should read this book. It's the title is A History of Modern India. History of Modern India. It's a recent book. All right, so it incorporates all the historiography, it incorporates all the quotations that you need to find. Just read this book for your preparation for, let's say, modern India, because it is a historiographical text. It does not only deal with objective history, it has got argumentation and everything that you need. Please read this work, and this is where I would like to conclude this lecture. All right, so we have discussed the problems with the Swadeshi movement. We discussed certain important events, certain important dates. We basically discussed the context of the Swadeshi movement, which is understanding the four trends of the moderate politics, the constructive Swadeshi, political extremism, and revolutionary terrorism. That is, you know, given out by, you know, Sumit Sarkar in order to understand the Swadeshi politics. We looked at the background of the Swadeshi movement, and if you have any queries, please put down, and you can contact me through email, or I would like to read your comments and your feedback about how this thing is going. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining in. Good evening. Take care. Bye-bye.